Welcome back to my Game a Month challenge. This is game number 2. This is the first video in the series, so this is actually the first look at the game Void Racer. So it's basically going to be a racing game, shocker, I know, set in space. And the inspirations, I guess, for this are sort of a mix of Rocket League and Mario Kart with a few other sprinkles of things thrown in is kind of what I'm shooting for. I've never created a racing game before in Unity. Well, just never created a racing game, period. I've never even really messed with vehicle physics. I ran a test just about a month ago just to see how to set up a car in Unity. And so I set one up, just followed a tutorial on YouTube, and then drove it around on a little hilly terrain thing that I made. But I will get into the weeds of the car physics and stuff later. For the first game a month I did, I restricted myself to only using Blender because I just needed to get better at box modeling and learning how to use Blender better. But for this one, I decided to not limit myself to Blender and not. I was going to try to not go for a low poly art style. The only problem is that these type of assets take a lot more time. Just for reference going through this, the previous game that I made where I was going for a low poly art style, those creatures took me about 3 hours to model, texture, rig, and animate. So I could do several of them in a night if I wanted to. This, on the other hand, I just made this car. There was no rigging or animating involved in this because the physics kind of handle the wheel animations. And the whole process took me 3 days with a considerable amount of work each day. I probably have close to 20 hours in this model. And I'll show you the final results and kind of break it down step by step here. First of all, this is the base model that I created in ZBrush. So I started with a sphere and just started pulling things out. I used mostly the move brush to get the basic shape, and then I started using the Boolean tool mixed with ZModeler to get some of the more hard surface areas. Like if I turn off live Boolean, you can see that the lights were cut out using Booleans. And as you can see, just this main body here is 540,000 polygons, so definitely not low poly. From there, I took it into Maya to retopologize just because I like their retopology tools a little bit better. But then I exported that out into Blender because I like Blender for pretty much everything else. So this is the official topology that you'll see in the game, but it will look better than this because of texture maps and stuff like that. And as you can see, the amount of verts in this is just under 6,000, so that's quite a bit less than what we had in ZBrush. And then here in Blender, I added a few more things like the underneath of the car here, and just made sure that I kept these as separate things to help the mapping. I'm still pretty new to it, but I thought that might help. So I've been trying to work on my 3D asset pipeline and just develop a process for making these models easier and making them more robust. The bulk of my knowledge in 3D modeling was used for 3D printing, so there was no like UVs, no texturing, no making sure that it has nice topology. So I'm still pretty new to all of that. So after I got it all retopologized, I took it back into ZBrush and created this higher detailed version of the car. So this is basically just subdivided. In fact, I can lower the resolution, but I can also go up to this high detail, and I achieved that by doing creases using ZModeler, so you can actually see that if I turn on polyfill. So there are creases all the way around here. And I also added UVs using ZBrush's UV master in the low poly version. So that way it allows me to have both a low poly and a high poly version, so I can use that to bake them in another program and get better textures. And I imported it into Substance Painter. As you can see, I'm using the trial for Substance Painter. I've never actually used this before, but I've watched enough YouTube videos of people making high quality 3D models to know that this is where I needed to be. So I got the trial and I'm testing it out. So this was the first thing I messed with, and I'm really impressed with the results. So I imported the model the normal way, and then you can actually come to this button right here and bake mesh maps. So there I was able to feed it the high poly version of the model and bake everything down. So like if I click on one of these layers that I have a mask on, I can show you that this is still the low poly version of the model. And if you look around the edges, you can see that there's, you know, it is still the low poly one. There's still those sharp edges. But since it bakes a normal map, it basically tells it how to reflect the light in a way that you don't see all those vertices. And it looks really, really nice. Then I just kind of went around and I added a bunch of layers, like this carbon fiber layer there, the grill in the front, just a few different things to make it look like a car. And I did create a wheel as well. This one is low poly with baked maps as well, so I can just import this in and use it for all the wheels. Then I exported everything out of Substance Painter and brought it into Unity. So I've got the car model here, and then I created the car material using all of the maps that Substance Painter gives you. And there's actually export options that are already ready to go for Unity. I initially tried Unity's URP project, but I could not get the model to look good at all. It looked like, it kind of looked like a PS1 game. So I switched to HDRP, and I've never made an HDRP project either. And there's a lot of settings, and it's very intimidating. But I just basically used the sample scene. So as you can see up here, I've got the light and some volumes that they had in the sample scene. And I just brought them over to my scene and did this. And I think it actually looks pretty cool. It doesn't look exactly like it did in Substance. I'm probably doing something wrong. But I still think it looks like a pretty cool car. And I'm pretty happy with how it came out. Even if it did take basically half the week to make this. So I probably spent another day just setting up the Unity project and trying to get this imported. So if you count that, it took me over half the week to just get this model ready to go. So after I had all that, I needed to actually make the game. And so I don't know all of the different techniques for making a racing game because it's surprisingly hard to find good information about making racers in Unity. There's a couple of pretty good videos out there. There's a lot of videos on just the wheel collider itself, but they all pretty much say the same thing. And that's just basically how to set it up and set the default values. And if you leave the default values the way they are, it works. The car is slow, and you can spin out if you try to, but for the most part, it feels like a functional car. But I tried messing with those values, changing everything. Like if I click on these wheel colliders I have, like if I mess with any of these values aside from stiffness, I just get crazy unpredictable results. And I know it's not an issue with Unity per se, it's my understanding of physics, but I had just a hell of a time getting anything resembling a functional racer out of it. I did eventually get there, so I can drive around, and don't mind the shaky camera, because I just have the camera parented to the car right now. I'm going to be creating a script that will make that follow a bit more smooth and not jerk around every time the car takes a turn or anything like that. But so this was my result, and this was 3 full days of just messing with it, Googling things, trying to find anything that worked. Because like I said, if I messed with those springs at all, the friction, I mean, if I messed with the friction, the car just would not stop sliding. And it didn't matter if I increased any of those values or decreased them. I tried decreasing them by small amounts, increasing them by small amounts, and then trying large amounts, and everything I did made it worse. So I was about ready to have to pull the plug on this because I couldn't get anything halfway functional. Now what I'm going for here is more of an arcadey style racer, which is probably my problem because these are using real world physics, and it's probably set up for more of a simulation racer. but I wanted it to control a little bit more like the Need for Speeds of the world, with a bit of extra stuff thrown in. And the problem I was having is that it would either spin out or it would roll. And I could fix one of those problems, but it would make the other problem worse. So if I increased the friction, it would roll because the tires weren't allowed to slide. So when it had too much force, it would just topple over. Then if I took away the friction to prevent rolling, then the car would just slide everywhere, and I couldn't take any sort of turn at any speed. And even just increasing the torque to make the car go faster, it just made those problems worse. And I was getting very frustrated, and finally I stumbled upon a post, and I will put this post down in the description. It's one guy, and he says answer is suspension bars or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was, or roll bars. Basically what he was saying is that cars don't run on 4 wheels, they run on 2 axles, which makes sense because most of us are at least familiar enough with cars like that to know that the 2 front wheels and the 2 back wheels are connected. So in Unity doesn't really treat them like that. They treat each wheel independently. And I guess in real cars there are like suspension bars or whatever these are called that link the 2 wheels on each axle. So say that I'm turning left, and that would make the car tilt to the right just because of all the forces. So the front left wheel starts to come off of the ground, and that's what would cause the tipping. And what these suspension bars do is it allows it to transfer some of that force onto the right wheel, and it basically stabilizes the car a bit more. Now, this didn't just immediately fix everything, but it was a lot better once I implemented those. And it was the only reason I was able to get anything like this. So I can't believe Unity doesn't have anything like that built in, or at least some documentation on it to make things easier for vehicle colliders. I still don't have very much luck tweaking the settings for this. I've been able to tweak them a bit more, but if I make things too fast, it just gets unpredictable and starts flying off in crazy places. So it's a very delicate balance, but I've gotten it to an okay point, and I think that's fine enough for me to just move on right now. Of course, I will continue to tweak things as I play and develop more things for the game, but since I am just giving myself a month to make this, I figured it was time to move on. And I'm decently happy. Like, I'm able to drive around. Like, this whole time I've been driving around, and I've probably done 8 to 10 laps, and it feels okay. Like, I can get used to it. I've gotten better at it, and it actually feels somewhat like a racing game. And I think fixing the camera will help a lot with that. But it does kind of stink because a big part of how the wheel physics are figured out is based on the positioning of the wheels and the shape of the overall body. So I was going to try to add some different variations of a car in here so you could pick a car, but I don't think I'll be able to do that unless I make it so that the wheels are in the exact same position and the body is the exact same shape, because otherwise I'd have to reconfigure these settings for both, or for all the different cars, and I don't know that I would be able to get consistently the same result. So they would probably result in certain cars being faster or better at turning, and therefore giving them an advantage in a race. So I think I'm going to have to stick with just this car for now. But I am going to implement the ability to change the color of the car, so at least there will be some variation, and it's not just identical cars driving around. And who knows, maybe if I find myself with a bunch of extra time, which definitely isn't going to happen, I might go in and try to figure that out. But I did add some more features to the car, which helped it feel better. So I do have some braking. It's not great, and it's really light braking, but I can brake, I can back up, so if I get stuck I can get out. And the car does decelerate, so there's even coasting in there, so if I just let go, the car will eventually slow down and come to a stop. I find that if I increase the brake torque at all, the car spins out super easy. and it acts more like an e-brake would in a game that you can use for like drifting and things like that. But that's not what I want for a brake. But I've been playing a couple other racing games just to try and get the feel of it, and they definitely brake a lot faster, and it just seems to slow down. And maybe I need to like reduce the steering while they're braking so that it doesn't slide as easy. I don't know, I'll have to tweak it, because right now you just brake really, really slowly. I also added a physics material, which was something I'd never messed with before, to the car. So it is, and it's basically just ice, so the car body itself doesn't have any friction. It will stop if you hit the wall, because it is just a box collider. But say that I were to like rub up against the wall, it doesn't do much. It will slow down just slightly, but it won't like stop your car completely like it would in a racing sim. So like I said, I'm going for more of an arcadey thing, and arcade racers usually let you slide up against some railings and things like that without too much of a penalty. And so I mentioned that this is going to be a space racing game. So a track like this in a space racing game would be pretty boring, and it would just be a normal racer set in space. So there are certain things that I need to do to be able to spice this up. And like I said, there's going to be some Mario Kart stuff in there, so I plan to have items and the ability to mess with the other racers once I have some AI racers in there. But beyond that, I'm going to have some crazier physics stuff, which is probably not a good idea considering the issues that I've been describing this entire video. But I've already implemented some. Like, as you can see, I have a jump, and I can orient the car in different ways while it's in the air, so I can roll. And it looks like a weird roll just because of the way that the camera's attached. Oh, and I just got stuck there. I will need to implement something to be able to flip the car when it gets stuck like that. But I plan to do some fun things with that. So you can maneuver your car around in the air. You can't change your direction yet. So like all those movements that you're doing are just orienting your car. It's not actually making you can't actually drive in any specific direction or move the car's velocity while you're in the air. But I plan on adding some boost so you can do that. And that's where the maneuvering of the car in the air allows you to kind of point your car in the direction you want to go and then boost that direction. So hopefully I can do some fun things with that. I'm also going to be messing with gravity, and that's going to be what the next video is, so I will talk in a lot more detail about that. And I never mentioned the track. So I just made these in Blender. They were super easy. It was just a cube that I squished down, extruded, and then I made a turn. And I just have like a square track piece. Here, I can show you that actually. I just have square track pieces like this, and then a curved track piece, and that's literally the only two pieces that I have. And then I just move them around. So like if I were to duplicate this one, I can move it freely, but if I hold Control, I can snap it. And I just adjusted the snap settings here in the grid and snap settings. So you can see I have the move one snap to 10, and that allows me to hold Control, and I can just snap these around. That way the pieces will always be touching each other the exact same way. So that way I can just move them around however I want, and they'll connect to each other. And I haven't experienced any issues with like the edges where they meet. And I'm sure everyone who's played Erasers experienced this at some point, especially the early ones. Like I remember playing one of the first Need for Speed games, and there were just certain areas of the map that you knew that even though it was a flat wall, that if you ran up against that, you would bump into an invisible collider that was just a seam that happened to be weird in the physics. So I haven't experienced that with this at all, and I hope it stays that way. Well, I will leave it at that, and like I said, I hope to do 2 devlogs this week, so hopefully you will see another video talking about the gravity and some of the more weird physics things. later this week. Thank you guys for watching, especially if you've stuck around this long. I'm really enjoying myself with these, and I'm learning a ton. So I'm glad that you guys are joining me in this, and I'm gonna try to do some things to improve the quality of these videos and make them a little more informational. So let me know if there's anything specific that you guys would like to see, or if I'm doing anything that's sort of annoying that you would like to see me do less of. I'm open to all feedback, because I want these videos to be really good, and I want to learn as much as I can with these games, and hopefully share some of that knowledge with you guys. So let me know. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.